So for this practical on the colour yellow, I'm going to paint this little vase of flowers, of wildflowers from my garden. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw it out in graphite pencil first of all, bearing in mind that then the pencil will show through when I add the watercolour paint. So as ever, before you start, when you're drawing something, when you're doing something from observation, take a deep breath, look at your shape of your subject, and you can do things like you can sort of rearrange things. So for example, there, these two, sorry, you can't see that, these two petals were kind of overlapping each other, so I've sort of moved them apart, so now they're separate from each other. There might be another area where you want the petals or the flowers to kind of face more upright, so make a few adjustments before you start. And then looking at the overall shape, you might imagine it wrapped in wrapping paper, and then what kind of shape would you have? For me, it's like it's sort of quite triangular here, so you've got the kind of triangle line along here, and then it goes to the point, oops, I just moved it, goes to the point of where the bottom of the vase is, so it's like doing that, sort of like a triangle or like a square on its side. And something else you might look at is where's the very top, what's happening at the very top of the, which you can't see because my, let me lift it up, oh you can, yeah, that, this top edge, this here is the very top, that's the uppermost stalk is there. And then what's happening at the bottom, so you've got this bit of little leafy bit, I might not include it, I might leave it out because it's kind of a bit, well, or I might include it, I don't know. So that's the most, the furthest point at the bottom. So I've got the point at the top and the point at the bottom, and then everything in between. So I can start to visualize it sitting on my page. I'm thinking about how much space I need to leave around things and what kind of size I need to do things. So I'm going to leave a little bit of gap at the top. So just kind of draw in the rough shape of that flower. And then I'm not going to draw everything, so I'm going to leave the stalk to paint it in so it'll be fresher and bright. I don't, because when you're using graphite, and I might swap to a thinner pencil. I'm using a mechanical pencil, which gives you a very fine line. When you're using graphite, although it doesn't dissolve into the paint, it will show. So it kind of dulls it in that way, in that you've got this kind of grey, graphite-y colour. But I might put it in very, very fine, just so I know where it is, that stalk there. And then where these flowers coming in here. Just going to pause for 1 second. And then things like the little polleny bits in the middle of the some of the flowers, so these little daisy-like flowers, they're just circles. You can choose how much of the detail to put in the drawing. You might want it to be more blurred and less, you know, less detailed. in which case you could just do it very, very lightly, or just indicate one or two of the circles. And then in the middle of this kind of wild rose, kind of looking really carefully at the different shapes that are happening in there. So there are these sort of little wiggly bits that are a bit like worms sticking up, and then you've got the kind of longer bits with the little dots on the end. It's like that leaf is, to me, the wrong way up, but then it's not. I'm going to try and turn it the other way up. It's upside down. It's only when you start drawing something that you notice things like that. Yeah, it's not it's not going to go the right way up. No, never mind. Might just turn it so I can look at, because it's got these interesting, it's actually black spot. I need to do something about that in my garden, but when I come to paint it, I'll turn it the other way up so I can get those nice, I mean, although it's a diseased thing, it's like, it makes nice patterns. So I'm just going to pause the video while I draw. I'm basically just drawing everything with this very fine mechanical pencil. So for the folds, I'm just going to draw with my wax candle to create a wax resist. Just the lines of the folds. I'm actually making them up a bit because on this side, I'm going to put that wiggly line on that side because I like that. So just drawing in, and I can't remember if I said I'm using satin smooth watercolor paper, because if you're drawing out with a fine pencil, if you're using cold pressed or rough watercolor paper, it'll be more difficult to get a fine, precise line. So I've got some turquoise blue on my palette from earlier, and I'm just going to use a flat brush, but not too big. I want it sort of fairly small. although having said that, I think I'm going to use a large one for the kind of larger areas, and then maybe use a round brush to sort of feed it in to the other areas. So I'm just going to make quite a pale wash with my turquoise. And remembering about when you're working in watercolour, it's best to start with the palest colours first and then work the shadows and mid-tones and dark tones in afterwards, whereas with oil or acrylic it's usually the other way around. So just going to put a very pale blue down, and you can see where I've drawn with the wax candle, it's resisting, so it's retaining the highlight. And I want to leave, it's okay to go over where there's going to be green bits, so the stalks and things, but I don't want to go over where the yellow is going to go, because the yellow will get will become dull if it has a layer of blue behind it, whereas green and blue, you know, yellow and green make blue. So sorry, yellow and blue make green, yellow and green make blue, yellow and blue make green. So if you have a blue under your green, it won't dull the green. Might make it a bit bluer, but whereas if you have blue and yellow mixed together, it creates like a greyish colour. So I'm just gonna, so going over where the leaves are is fine, leaving where the yellow flowers are going to be exposed. When it gets to the vase, I'm going to go across the whole thing. Actually, should have probably put some wax on there, but never mind. And then I've got this other blue, which I think is a Prussian, yeah, it's a Prussian blue on my palette, and I'm just dabbing my brush into it. So I've got quite a big splodge. Oh, wrong place. I've got a big splodge of Prussian blue on my brush there. And if I'm just going to feed it in gently here and there. To create a bit of depth in the bottom and also a bit of perspective, because if the bottom is brighter and darker, it's going to come forward more. And then maybe here and there in the, just literally dropping in tiny splodges of it. I don't want to overdo it, so I'm going to stop, and then I'm going to get a big round brush and pick up some more of the turquoise blue, but that's thicker. So I had this very thin wash, and then I'm just going to pick up some thicker onto the end of my round brush, and then I'm just going to pop that in near to the darker Prussian blue areas, just to sort of accentuate those kind of, all the depth in those areas. And then maybe a little bit, I don't want to do too much though, just a little bit kind of towards the back, but I want to keep it quite light and bright, so that's probably enough. And if it does this feathery thing and you don't want it to, just work your brush back and forth across to prevent that, but you might like it, so you might want to leave it there. So I've done that, and next I'm going to just go over with the blue, the wash that I had, because there are some of the leaves that I didn't go over, and I did go over other ones, so I want them to all be similar. So oops, so just going over those in the blue so that when I put the green on, it won't look too strange. So, and then for my green, I'm going to, starting with a lighter green, I'm going to put the greens in next. I'm going to leave the yellows till last. So I have this bright yellow green, which is a very lime green. We'll look at green more next week, but I'm going to get quite a thin round brush. This is a size 4, and just getting quite a lot of water into that green. And then what I want to do is I'm going to work really quickly to put in all the stems really quickly in this very pale green, this sort of pale bright lime green. And I'm going to just use the very tip of my brush. So I'm just going to go like, and it's going to make that sound effect as well. So I'm going to go around, you know, where I've got these very pale lines, very fine lines, very lightly drawn, of where all the stems are, the fine stems. I'm just going to work them in really fast in this bright green. I'm going to go back over them, part of them with the darker green as well, but this is just the initial. Okay, there's one there. Okay, just checking that I've done all of them, and then I'm going to go where the leaves are. I'm going to go over those in this bright green as well. I'm going to go in with the darker green later, but just want to and then there's the stem here. There's a little bit of green in the vase everywhere. Okay, so then there are some quite nice greys happening. But before I do those, I'm going to use the Viridian green. This is actually, yeah, Viridian green. And while the leaves that I've just done are still wet, whoops, get it all over my thumb, I'm going to just lift off some very thick pigment onto the tip of my small round brush, and I'm just going to just feed in that dark green. We'll do more leaf studies next week. And I was going to put in, I've got some black spot on my roses. I was going to put that in, but I think I'm actually going to leave it out and just have these sort of interesting greens, contrast of greens happening instead. Or I might put it in later, I don't know. And then here and there where there's a bit of depth, I'm going to add a little bit more water to it now. And elsewhere where I've got these other leaves, I'm just popping in a bit of depth of colour here and there. So I want to keep it quite light and open. I don't want it to be too detailed and kind of entrenched in detail, or get too dark and too kind of claggy. So working sort of a deep pigment into a wet, like a very wet area, can kind of give you a bit of depth of colour without going too thick. You're kind of letting it spread around and move about. So I've got some Payne's Grey on my palette now, and I'm just going to water that down a bit, and then just pop some of it sort of gently into the vase. I don't want to overdo it, but it just will have a bit of a, you know, give the impression of a glassiness or something. Again, being careful not to overdo it, and choosing whether or not to leave this featheriness that might happen. Kind of going very feathery. I'm going to leave it in some places and take it out in others. I'm just going to let that dry for 1 second. So thinking about how to tackle the flowers, I'm going to use different yellows for the different flowers, because I've got 3 different flowers here. We've got the wild roses, we've got these yellow daisies, and then we have these, which I think are some kind of clover, like yellow clover or something. Don't actually know what they are, but they're wild, from wild seeds that I sowed in my garden. So I'm going to do I think I'll do the daisies in a lemon yellow, the roses in a gamboge, and use cadmium for the clover. I think it's clover. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to do the roses first in gamboge. So we looked at how gamboge on the palette looks really murky, but when you add plenty of water to it, it comes out, it's like magic, it comes out really, really bright. So I'm going to thin it down a lot, and do a wash across the whole of the I think I might have got a little bit of blue in it. It's gone a bit green. Always be careful about keeping your colours really. I think it's maybe the water's a little bit too blue. But anyway, never mind. So that's your gamboge. And then I'm going to use a thinner round brush for when I do the petals of the daisy type flowers. I'm going to do them in lemon yellow. I'm going to show you a method for doing petals where you let the brush do the work. So I'm picking up some nice lemon yellow on my brush, and then I'm just going to, I just do that because the brush is already the shape of the petal. It's like long and thin. You don't actually need to do anything. You just press it onto the paper and it prints the paint on. You can also do this method for leaves if you have a thicker round brush, and you can, you know, the shape of the round brush is basically the shape of a certain type of leaf. I can't remember if I've shown you this. Some of you I think will have seen me do this before, but and then there are some little buds. Let's pop them on there. And then the other ones I'm going to do in cadmium. Go back to a bigger brush because they're slightly, you know, they're bigger petals. Add some water, quite a lot of water to my cadmium. Now I've got this is cadmium yellow deep. I'm going to add a little bit of lemon to it to lighten it up a bit, because it's going to look really odd if it's so much darker than the others. So popping that in. You can be quite free with this, because the beauty of drawing it out in graphite pencil first is that you can be much more free with your brushwork, because you've got the definition of the lines. So if it does this thing where it's all spreading out and the colours are kind of going over the line and everything, that's actually doesn't matter, because you've got the precision of your shape of your flower already drawn in. And so next I'm going to tackle the some of the details on the rose. And what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to make a little quite a small circular nodule shape with just a tissue, just ordinary tissue, and I'm just going to press it into the middle to lift out the paint, because I want to paint in the kind of details in this quite a deep cadmium, and I don't want it to bleed into too much into all the gamboge that's there. So just lifting up, I've got this super long so Raphael 0. It's like extra long. Oops, it's very, very, very thin, as you can see, and extra long, and it's quite nice for doing very detailed things. So I'm just going, ooh, that's bled a bit too much. Actually, that's okay. So I'm going to just go around. It's a bit like colouring in, filling in the colour in there, and then where I did the wiggly worms before, I'm just going to add some lemon yellow to just pop it in. I'm not being too precise with that. And then just going to add some lemon yellow into these ones because they've got a bit of a paler yellow colour happening. I can feed that into the edges, you'll get a bit more differentiation happening. And then the middle of the daisies, that's like a cadmium yellow, so I'm going to just do dots. It will bleed a little bit into the lemon yellow petals, just being aware that that's happening. And then for this rose, so you haven't got, you know, this rose is closed, obviously, you haven't got the little frondy shapes. I'm just going to lift it out slightly just to make sure it's dry enough and it's not going to bleed everywhere. And then I'm just going to go in and just draw, just following the line of the petals really. And this will change as it dries, so I'm just going to do it subtly. You can choose whether to do this. You might want to leave it and not actually do this. It's up to you whether you like the drawn lines showing more clearly. And then I might just do a little bit along the lines here, just a little bit of definition. Then I'm going to get my #1 brush, pick up a little bit more gamboge on it, and just have it a bit thinner than that. A bit thinner than that, but thicker than it was, and just kind of put a few touches of it just to suggest a bit of shadow or depth around that rose, and again kind of around here, and then I can lift it out again with the tissue because it's gone a bit too blobby, which is a technical term. So lifting it out, so you know it's done a thing, it's done something. And then if it's gone too intense, you can add more water to sort of blur it back up again. I was quite enjoying how blurry it all was. Ooh, and I've missed some spots in the center there. Okay, and so this is the point, sort of winding down a bit. Things like you might want to mix your viridian green and your lime green and create a bit more definition in the stalks. So at this point you're really looking to see anything that needs a bit more definition, or you want to change and make, or you might like it very loose and open and not really do anything more, but you might just add, might be some colours here and there that need a little bit more in them. Thinking about your background, how that's working or not. I'm just going to draw in a little bit of shape. So things like there's this area that's quite pale, you might decide you want it to be more like these other areas, so you can go back in with some bit more turquoise, maybe just having a think about how the picture works as a whole now, and how much definition you want, whether you want it like more open or more defined. If you want it more open, you can add more water. If you want it more defined, add more details. Also, what can help is if you kind of step away from it or look over the other side of the room or go for a little walk and then come back and then look at it again, and then you'll kind of see it with a bit of a fresher eye, and you might see different areas that you might want to enhance or change. And so I don't want to do too much. I'm kind of adding a little bit more depth now with the dark green and stuff, and indicating the serrated edges of the leaves, but I don't want to overdo it, because at this point, this is the point at which it becomes really tempting to kind of start outlining everything and putting loads of detail in. But once you do that, there's a very fine balance between keeping it fresh and open and blurry, which is like the nature of watercolour, or making it a bit more graphic and very defined, which is, it can work fine, but it's a delicate balance. It can then become overworked. So I'm going to stop the recording. Hope you've enjoyed it.